ternura brota de tus entrañas, madre mía. Que torrente de fe baña tu mente, haciendo de tu mundo fantasía. Que férrea voluntad te da el impulso que te proyecta fuera de tus años y reverdecen flores de verano tu rostro de ojos claros. Que música celeste te acompaña, haciéndote flotar sobre la farsa de un mundo interesado. Y en una hermosa mística terrena nos proteges a todos con tus ruegos, porque todo lo das y nada pides, madre, te amo.
Wait till they find out how many images we have. You got so much time. I hope none of you have plans later on this evening, okay?
Or tomorrow.
If there are people you need to call, yeah, this could go well into the night. So, I mean, again, I want you to just lay back, get comfortable. Yeah, got a lot to cover tonight. A lot to cover. Yeah, you good? All right. All right, so we just got the green light. We're going to get going. Is everybody comfortable? Okay, good, excellent. Well, thank you all so much for coming. I'm Dennis Scully. For those of you that might not know, I'm the host of the Business of Home podcast, and I'm also the curator of the Dialogues on Design series here at the New York School of Interior Design. Through sponsorships and ticket sales and subscriptions, this whole series raises money for our scholarship programs. And I am grateful to all of the people on this list, some generous donors to this Dialogues on Design series. And in addition to this list, I'm happy to report that we got a very generous last-minute donation that I want to give a special shout-out to. The Angelo Donghia Foundation has just given us our largest gift ever for the Dialogues on Design series. I was raised in a household where we're not allowed to talk about money, so I can't tell you exactly how much, but it was the most we've ever gotten, so I'm pretty excited about that. We also got a very generous gift from Holly Hunt. Actually, Holly will be joining me on this very stage in a month from now, and I'm looking forward to that. But in the meantime, I would love to give a round of applause to all of these generous donors who made this program possible. We're all incredibly grateful for their generosity. So, tonight, I'm thrilled to welcome Bill Sofield. I'm going to embarrass you for a minute, and then it's going to be over, okay? You ready? Bill is a legendary designer, widely recognized for his thoughtful, holistic approach to interiors. He is a recipient of the Cooper Hewitt National Design Award, and as he was reminded last night, a member of the Interior Design Hall of Fame. Someone once wrote about Bill that his ascent to stardom can be attributed to his unerring ability to reinterpret modernism. And he does so with an arresting combination of controlled virtuosity and a flair for the theatrical. And I think we're very much going to get a taste of that tonight, as you will soon see. Will you please join me in welcoming Bill Sofield? So I said to Bill, Bill, I just want a few projects, just a few images, you know, we're mostly going to chat. And he said, no, I got it, Dennis, I got this. Yeah, okay. So tonight we're going to do something a little bit different, okay? Because lo and behold, we've actually got we've got a great many images that we want to take you through. And so normally for this series, I would sit down with Bill. We'd have a chat about the life and times of Bill Sofield. Where are you from? Where'd you go to school? Tell me about it all. But for the first time in the history of this series, I am actually going to hand this remote control over to my guest, something I've never before felt comfortable with. Don't feel entirely comfortable doing tonight, but I'm going to do that because Bill has put together for us, well, it's quite a show. So collectively, we're going to go along with Bill as he tells us a bit about his career, and we're going to jump in at various points to talk about what I asked Bill to think about for this audience. And I'm wondering, before we even start, how many students are here tonight? Let me just see a show of hands. Okay. Former student. Okay. Well, thank you for coming. Okay. So good. So quite a number, right? So as we talked about, I wanted to gear this very much to students and to help them understand what is about to come for them. And Bill said, don't worry, this is all about demystifying the whole thing. So we're going to go along with Bill's tour of his career and the many people who have influenced both his work and his life. And we're gonna jump in along the way. But I know that he feels much more comfortable when this control is in his hands. As I sense is likely the way it is, and Emma, you can tell me in the office, right? Pretty much. Yeah, I get it. So Bill, again, you are the first and I'm guessing the only guest that I'm gonna do this for, but I'm gonna turn this over to you, and you can you can take it away.
Okay, so this is how this goes. If I could speak eloquently on a topic, I would not have been a designer to begin with. So this is not a skill set. And so when Dennis said this, and let's maybe a little chit chat,
please,
to forewarn students,
yes,
of why they should not be a member of this profession, or if they choose to, do not marry the biker or the exotic dancer. That I thought I would, in a moment of panic, put together 240 slides so that if there was an uncomfortable silence, I had.
That's right. Oh, right. If only if there was an uncomfortable silence, he'd have the 240 slides in his back pocket.
As a backup, you do not have to look at them all.
Yeah.
So let me start. I grew up in a very small town.
It's modest home, a childhood home.
This is my childhood home. In Metuchen, New Jersey, and I walked 20 minutes down the block. This is a photograph of me playing with a hoop in front of my alma mater, Princeton University, which is the first campus, meaning in the field, because the idea was that this was not an urban situation, that by interacting with nature, that this was the way you route to higher learning. You can see here already neoclassicism was something big. Now I had a wonderful professor, Billy Shellman, who was from Savannah, and he started the first architecture lecture by saying, "Gentlemen," now the school had been co-ed for 10 years, but now, gentlemen, he said, ever since our ancestors limped out of the primordial ooze on limp fins, they had been trying for shelter, to return to shelter. And he went through the history of pyramids, et cetera, and after 45 minutes of the first lecture, he said, and if it's one thing I can mold on your little impressionable, squishy minds, is that flattery, my dears, will get you anywhere you need to go. The other great truth came from Miss Zelinsky, my 7th grade teacher, who said, life is tough. The older you get, the harder it gets, and then you die. So taking these two bits of wisdom, the other thing, this is my launching point. One thing that was great about Bill is he only taught via primary text. So these are the types of letters we read. I will not bore you, but Frank Lloyd Wright to his clients and backwards. Most of them have to do with people owing, Frank Lloyd Wright owing people money, and him refusing to pay them. And if you ever have a chance to read all the letters, they're fantastic. Mr. Kaufman, I'm saying, if you can't figure out the engineering drawings, I'm not going to come down. You just can't wrap your provincial minds around it. Mr. Kaufman responding something to the fact that if you've managed to cash my provincial check. And so again, it was a great way of learning in that, it wasn't art history, it was really understanding the client relationship. He also said, if we complained, at least nobody's head is cut off these days if the client doesn't like the design, as in the old days. Now, just to contextualize, it was the 70s. I know I'd look extremely young, but
you can't.
It was the late 70s, and international style was beginning to be questioned. So it was high core before me, and what we were taught was, there was an antiseptic quality, there was no touch, feel, humanity to this architecture, and this is when Michael Graves was a professor of ours in postmodernism, and I'm not quite sure how many of you youngsters know postmodernism, but Em and I and our generation still carries that injury. But this was going to introduce color and texture and form and back into the sterile, anonymous architecture of the international style. Our great visionary, Belay, really exploring classicism and the Enlightenment and taking inspiration from that. Great camaraderie, great discussion. It was wonderful. Graduated, and just to contextualize, the architect, so everybody was enamored of architecture at this point. Notice that Michael Graves goes ahead of Princess Diana, people being eaten by lions, and the Oklahoma bombing. So this is this thing. The reality, and then we went to see the buildings and hope, grumpy, horny, dopey, and whatever.
I'm not sure that last one was one of them, but yes.
This fascistic terror that, this really Mussolini-esque structure, and here's my idol, and, I thought that, just the ominous quality of these buildings overpowering streetscape, and of course I was brokenhearted, moved to New York, worked for an old boy architecture firm. Every project was structured like a lawsuit. Every project ended as a lawsuit. And the idea was that the architects' brilliant ideas were being stymied by if only the client could understand their great poetic vision. Enter the client. Now, we were taught by our bosses to dislike the client. We, on the other hand, loved our clients. They usually had seen the likes of us before, had been around the block one or two times, and had a very clear idea as to what they would like their homes to look like. And just because there was one on the right did not mean that there needed to be one on the left. And coming out of that, really came, the thing that I took most with that is that it's the client-designer relationship is a cherished one. It is about a great tennis game. It is about your either opponent or collaborator. But for me, if I just did the same thing again and again, I would be bored. And, Emma, all of the wonderful people I collaborate with over the years that are here. Really, it is that teamwork. I know everybody says it's the team. I hate the word staff. I hate the word client. I don't know what the other word for client is. But it really, design, unless it's a collaborative effort, I don't find interesting. Because for me, design is problem solving. As any young designer moving to New York, your first client is a roommate or somebody you know from school who takes pity on you. And this is a loft on Great Jones Street back when it was very dangerous. AIDS. New York was in the dumpster. It was the city had gone bankrupt. High crime, violence, and AIDS had decimated our design community, and so really it was about taking this loft and using the raw materials we had from the demolition. So introduce me as green. But all the furniture was made out of the beams we'd cut out of the ceiling. This was block printed fabric that was pretty ugly, but used it on the reverse side, and it became pretty nice. And of course, matching the foam to the upholstery was critical. But keeping evidence, I think this is like where the first idea of evidence and decay came in. So the scorched factory wall is still kept there, and then contrasted with the fabrics. And keeping the decayed factory walls. And it was also the ghosting of that building in the background, I think, was very important. And it kind of spoke to the AIDS and the death and the violence and the emptiness of New York, which was also great in terms of offering us incredible possibility, I found. So years later, segue to Rose Hill, which we did for Bryce and Helen Marden, how that initial kernel of a project influenced later work, and the only reason I show Bryce's work here has to do with the fact that he laid out all the marble patterns like a painting. Helen was also a brilliant artist and a brilliant colorist, and here, their little fixer-upper on the Hudson. It was one of the old Livingston mansions, and it was in rough shape when we inherited it. The property's name was Rose Hill, and so we worked very tirelessly to get the right shade of rose for the columns, restoring it but not restoring it too much. To get those brick walls to look like that required so much effort. So to get all of this to look this way, because it didn't look this way. So every stone, every brick, it pretty much is new, but you would never know it. And that's there were bits of archaeology that I found, like that the door. Look, I'm going to do this too. Thank you.
Oh, this is the other thing. So he asked if he could bring a laser pointer with him as well. Yeah, did I mention? Yeah, here we go. We're going to have the laser pointer too. Yeah.
So this little bit, which we found in the barn, inspired pretty much everything in the house. So the jade marble came from that. Again, this little shred. So wherever there was a bit of archaeology, we kept it. So it's this real juxtaposition between these modern elements and then the antique. And so again, the crumbled piece of molding, and then of course, in contrast to custom dyed lime green velvet walls, because they absorb sound and keep you warm in the winter. And then, of course, Helen's great sense of style and how that shell created such a great environment for their collection and their art, and how what the background feels for me is it's just inevitable in keeping the floors the way they were. Again, just sanding through steel wool layer after layer. Helen said, "Don't all great houses have an antler chandelier?" She said, "I think we need an antler chandelier." So that was our response to it's a pink spunding. And this staircase, several of the spindles existed. We found it. And the other ones were recreated. So again, knowing when to insinuate ourselves and knowing when to back off. Hanging a library into this double height space. This is the Habs photograph of what we inherited. Pulling it back so the underside of the balcony is there, but keeping it fairly austere. This is the floor that was laid out like a painting. Each marble, each slab was laid out for its pattern, and this was great. I introduced Helen to the sledgehammer. The sledgehammers are one of my favorite things because demolition is fairly inexpensive. So this was a warren of small bedrooms. So we managed to turn a 26-room mansion into a one-bedroom, basically. But it created all this light and air, and again, we'd really tried to capture the evidence of every incarnation of the house. There's a little cartoon. It was an orphanage at one point. There's something that says men's pants, 5 cents, someplace, and the Habs photograph, and then restoring its original coloration. Gucci. Here's a picture of me when I first started working with Tom. Unfortunately, Emma and I saw Mr. Ford last week, who annoyingly looks exactly like this photograph. So there's a perception of Gucci that is false in terms of this very luxurious, very wealthy company. Well, that was not the case. It had been licensed to the hilt and was really down and out. Within days of Tom finishing the first collection, we had a corpse. Everything involved. So the first collection was launched in the fall of '95, which means this happened in March, I believe, of '95. And so not only did we have like a tenuous situation, but now we had a crisis on our hands. So I love this.
And are you all familiar with the drama that he's referring? Okay, so everyone gets, all right. Just want to make sure that everyone knew the saga of the Gucci.
So this one was really great because there's a little news clip of her mother taking her Gucci fur away from her saying, "Darling, a trench coat is more appropriate for prison." So, it started, Gucci was primarily accessories and silks. So there were these tiny little storefronts, and Domenico De Sole, who's brilliant, and headed up, was a family attorney and then really CEO of Gucci, said, Bill, I've got some great news. I've got you 5,000 more square feet of space. However, that was usually in a parking garage 3 blocks over, and we somehow had to connect the small storefront on Sloane Street to something else. So staircases became very important. So again, design is problem solving. How do you motivate somebody to walk up 20 feet, which is a lot? So creating landings, creating anticipation. Also, there was an issue, so it was an event, and from every position you could see different product, and you could see handbags at certain levels. So also trying to refer to the old Gucci without being literal, so the horse bit from the shoe got reinterpreted as a light. It became sensational very quickly. There was no stock because the 3 old ladies making the product in Florence were still making it, and so we couldn't keep the product in the store. So creating something that looked as beautiful with one handbag and shoe in it as a full, and also accentuating textures and form, but again, kind of creating this abstraction. Also, I was a big fan of Armani, the way Armani merchandising, because if you didn't know what you're doing, like when I first moved to New York and you're trying to figure it out, it's like it was very clear. This is the shirt, here's the jacket with front hang, here's the pants, here are the shoes. Like this is how you do it. And you were also very up close to all the cuff details. So wanted to kind of take that and bring it here. So the interlocking store displays could show you the accessories and the shoes and the shirts. Also, Tom was doing these very subtle, 12 shades of gray and shiny fabrics. Some of the things were sheer, and so to be able to convey to an old client that you might be naked when you went to the office was really important, so they knew what they were buying. And then, of course, how that translates to the architecture. Tom's only directive was to create the architectural equivalent of the clothing, and then as we very quickly developed, right, Emma? I mean, within moments, we realized that if we made things curved, like the product, then you couldn't distinguish the product from the architecture. So that's really where the angularity came from, and then creating these fantasy environments that the ad people would inhabit. So this again was the VIP dressing room. So, and then every iterative process. So, again, packaging consistent with architecture, resurrecting chats on limestone, which hadn't really been done since Rockefeller Center, which is, and then ultimately Gucci Cafe, Gucci menus, Gucci placemats. But then, again, who are my heroes? Who am I inspired by? I always loved Philip Johnson's Four Seasons. This was my little payback, because I am, nothing comes from nothing. I think Maria von Trapp said that, right? So, really, how can you take your heroes and reinvent them and keep their voices alive? So, and this was by Nancy Lorenz with the stylized bamboo grove. This is a project in Ginza, Japan. And then also the same client. So trying to create something very different, creating a brand identity that was extremely distinct. When Tom took over Yves Saint Laurent, it was the how that would then have an architectural equivalent. So again, you'll see a Frank Lloyd Wright theme coming through here. But the Frank Lloyd Wright first kind of shopping mall is on the left, and his little spire, which I say came from the palm tree. I don't think it really did, but then my kind of referring vaguely to that geometry in the inscribed space above. It was also a very clever way of making the building look bigger without actually owning that space. And again, how to the Yves Saint Laurent woman played to win. She wasn't screwing around. She was fierce. She was ferocious. She was all empowered, and that was that was what was wonderful about that. It was very hard. It was very aggressive, very, very sexy, and so there's kind of the violent chopping of the wood. Again, being in nothingness, real luxury is nothing. So these Zen gardens, in the day and age. And of course, I came from, worked with Mr. Lauren on his homes and then his stores.
Yes.
I'd also come from the pilot high and watch it fly, school of design and lifestyle marketing, and this was the opposite, the luxury of space.
Well, and take a moment with that, Bill, because you and I have talked in the past about how you've been so influenced by some of your clients, and extraordinary for you to develop this relationship with Tom Ford so early on in your career, and then clearly he wants to continue to work with you for years, and I can't remember how many, Emma, you tell me, how many stores, how many, right? Over 400 Gucci locations over the years. So just an extraordinary relationship. Tell me a little bit about that relationship. What was it like working with him? And you mentioned Ralph Lauren, who you also had worked with. Tell me a little bit about the difference between the two and what Tom got out of you.
Well, Tom was trained as an interior designer. I knew Tom socially when we were, just out of college, so we kind of knew one another. I think there was a trust there. Also, we had an incredible synergy. Here's a complete digression, so I don't have to answer your question.
I knew it. You see, this is why. You can see what I'm working with.
There's a string, I think, quartet called Ethel. And I think they're kind of like Kronos, as I recall. And by the way, if there's anything I say, you need to Google it, because
fact check anything.
I believe everything I'm told. So, and they talked about flow. Like, at what point is water still, and at what point is it rushing? And somewhere, and they talked about all four of them as they're playing, at a certain point, it develops this life of its own. It has nothing to do with their individual parts. And I feel that was very much the case there. Everybody was responding to their own influence or vibrating with what was in the environment at the time. And I'm not one of those people who believes in graphs and pie charts and what, trends at all. I guess it's like if I'm honest with myself, then I think there'll probably be somebody else who feels that way too. I think Mr. Lauren was he's very, very generous. There was a situation where I'd done something extremely extravagant, white silk file cabinets and L.C. DeWolf lucite furniture and leopard this and white wall tile. And he was like, oh my God, this is so off-brand. Kandinsky prints, Malevich black on black over the mantle. And he was like, this just isn't on brand. And he was very, very generous and called in and said, he said it was, people knew it smelled right. They didn't know what it was, but it smelled right. They knew that they'd seen something authentic. So so that's, I guess, working with both, Mr. Lauren and Tom in that respect, and very, very hardworking. It would be, I'd be in Japan, he'd be in London. He'd say, "Oh my God, it's 4 a.m. You're in Japan? I had no idea." Anyway, let's open the drawings up to say it's 7. So we were kind of working all the time at that point. But we could pick the same white out of 100 whites from other sides of the globe. So we were very fortunate.
But you had a great synergy.
Oh,
clearly,
unbelievable. And again, I think he's extremely hard on himself. I'm extremely.
That's
hard
what everyone's told me that has worked with him. That he's very.
I think it's always good to be self-critical in that way. again, so, of course, we now won all sorts of, there's a picture of me winning all those awards.
Yes.
And then kind of as a palate cleanser, trying to, when the minute you get associated with some success, and people want to repeat that style. And so Harry Winston was a bit of a challenge. Again, none of this existed, but it's a fantasy of what Harry Winston should have been that had been ripped out. So nothing here was literal, but it was trying to create vitrines that had the proper lighting, really were up to contemporary standards in terms of safety. Jenna was here someplace, a lot of thanks to Jenna, who collaborated with us at the studio, but started out our relationship at Harry Winston. But incredible technical challenges, but again, making it feel incredibly glamorous. The screens below on the left to make sure that there was privacy. So even though the windows had been pretty much closed up, but we wanted the natural light. But you didn't want to have somebody looking at you buying a ring from the street. So and then as that translated across, now things come full circle. Our first office, the old boy one, was actually next to Harry Winston on Fifth Avenue, and architects had offices in places like that. And then, again, working with Tom years later, when he had his own brand and creating this, at the time, just the blend of art and antiques, and this was not minimal. I think so. But again, having that sense of the antique, and then how that translated. This is Milan, always incorporating art. This was, what was it? Guy Trebet, I think, said temples of testosterone, but as it translated to LA. And then this was, again, another stair. How do you get people up? Women's wear was added later because of licensing conflicts. There was a certain do not compete time. And then, so we had menswear store, introduce women's wear years later. How do you get people up to a second level from a menswear store? And this was a stair in Rodeo Drive where it's this one thing I'd always wanted to do is that optical effect where at a certain point your reflection disappears and it jumps behind you. So, and then, we got good at stairs. This is only pinned to 2 points, one at the bottom and one at the top. So again, just once you get good at something, you break your own records. Well, if they could do it, then they could do it in half the time or half the budget. But it's great. There's that kind of athletic challenge. Anyway, back to. So this is about anonymity. And I'm going to wing through this, but a project in Miami that didn't happen. Again, I always get the call, Bill, we're in luck. We found the most perfect property in Miami. So it was in rough shape. This was it in its heyday, and this was our scheme for it. Again, a fantasy of what that building would have been like. It was never like this. But again, kind of keeping it authentic to what the Miami aesthetic would have been with the columns and the terrazzo and the view out to the ocean. This is the actual building. Notice the rear facade. This is what was approved by Landmarks, which was much better than the original facade, but was still very much in keeping. The real trick here was transferring air rights to an adjacent property, which is what's ghosted in the background. In order to do that, I had to remove a lot of square footage from this building. So creating these spaces that were legally without roofs, but felt like indoor spaces, which ended up being a lot nicer than if they were open. And always preserving that mural was on the old 40s building. I don't know, River House. Well, I think this is a reaction to, because we were then only, all this stuff is out of sequence, by the way. So This was when we only got work that they were like, yeah, modern work, because we'd done Gucci, and that was successful. So it was like, no, we don't really want to do that. We've already done that. And so it was like, they were like, well, can you do something a little more feminine? Okay. And so this client of ours, River House, was able to recombine. We were able to recombine the old bottom lead triplex. It had been completely dismantled, and then this is our reinterpretation of it. I think one of the major tricks was getting air conditioning in. So casting these grills and insinuating them in the windows so that you would have no idea that they weren't there to begin with. And then, doing the snake stitch embroidery on the draperies to highlight that. The mirrored ceiling was there's an air conditioning slot around the edge, and we didn't want the ceilings to feel lower, looking at all the ducts. Just practicality, like no place for dining room doors, so creating this portiere. Just as that translates to pretty much everything. Oh, look, we left it. See, I took out 2.
Oh, yes, two were removed at the 11th hour, so don't worry. It's going to whiz by.
And creating a new staircase that, again, feels like it's always been there, from motifs that had been in the building. This was fun. We wove a fabric that looked exactly like the gilded painted wall covering. That's from Nancy Reagan's White House, that chandelier. So, okay, so that's that. And then, again, I think if we did the same thing everywhere, we'd be bored out of our minds, because, it just, again, it's the collaboration. It's
sure.
So fun. And we usually have clients that are repeat offenders. So, we say we're often not the first lover, but we're usually the last. And so it'll be like, we loved what you did for us in the city, but now we bought a house, a plot in the country. So Red Mountain was this incredible landscape in Aspen, but the trick here is not to damage the landscape, because it's so harsh that it would take a lifetime for it to grow back. So this was insinuating a house in a landscape using micropylons so that nothing around it was disturbed. And contractors say it's impossible. We have to prep for construction, this and that. Well, it's like, well, let's treat this nature as if it were the Frick. If we were from New York. If we build next to the Frick, we somehow don't manage to tear it down in the process. So that kind of set it home. And so again, this is one where from the street side, because it's in a community and you don't want to appear, or I didn't want, and I don't think the client liked the idea of appearing ostentatious. It was just, low. So it's a very, very low-slung building from the street side. And so, and as you come in, the house descends the mountain and opens up. And you get this incredible view. The ceiling is shaped that it's acoustical. Everybody loves big windows. Problem with big windows is the place can get very bright acoustically with the sound ricocheting off the glass. So the ceiling, there are all these boards that have spaces between to absorb sound. It's a way of hiding architectural downlight. Architectural downlight is in those slots, so that again, and this is, as Russell and I are on the board of the glass house together, a trick from learned there is, you don't want the glass to turn into a mirror at night, so in order you light the outside, not the inside, so that you can see out to nature. So that's that, and just anyway, just again, it's just there are horrible rules. I'm going to write a book after my nervous break, one of my nervous breaks, and I have nothing else to do, of what every great building would look like if it had to conform to modern handicapped and child rule. So the 4-inch spacing of the handrail, and so this alternates the metal and the glass so it didn't look like a prison. And there it is in winter. TVs and mountains. Well, everybody wants a TV, right? So you can incorporate them gracefully. And then the dining room, the whole corner opens up, so you really are dining in the mountain. And then a ranch. So the commission was, I want to build a log cabin in Colorado. I was like, well, and this is the original homestead on the right. So he's like, well, the thing about that is, no matter how big the house is, we went to look at a lot of big houses, they look ridiculously small in that landscape. So, and then the other thing is that, climates aren't as harsh, or our relationship to nature is different. So, tried to blur. This slide is again some kind of craziness where this is the outside stone, weaving carpets to look exactly like the stone, so that you aren't aware that there's a difference in material. But getting that to line up over an entire 30-foot walkway was quite the challenge. But again, the horse trough, how it integrates into the landscape. We had nothing to do. We're in the middle of nowhere in Colorado at night, so that I do love architectural history. So this Stanford White inspired me in terms of some of his things. So we all sat around with nails in the evening and hammered them into wood to create that pattern. And then again, kind of doing the reverse. So the log becomes the glass and and again, the inside out. So the great room. And all the guest rooms they're individual cabins, again, so you can tromp out and don't have to be underfoot. Or, I mean, if I'm a guest, I don't really want to be underfoot. or I need some space. And then, again, the variation. So this is the master wing using stone logs instead of wood logs. This is the bathroom, so that the shower is the tub, and you can open the windows and be inside, outside. I think this is the last.
Are you okay? You guys okay? All right.
79th Street. So this goes full circle back to contextualism. Dan Brodsky called, lovely man, and said, well, we have this site, incredible site at the corner of on Lexington Avenue and 79th Street. And this is what it was. It was Hunter College, and not a particularly appealing building for a residential neighborhood. So nobody was really sad to see it let go. And one of the lessons I learned, I got a lecture Francois Choey had given it. Preservation didn't exist, by the way, until very recently at school. But she came in and she was a great preservationist. We were all very excited. And she said, tear it down, tear it down, tear it down. Unless, she said, the Parthenon was built on the column drums of all the temples that went before it. But if you think for one moment that what you put back is not better than what you tore down, then stop, which I thought was a great bit of advice. So I did not feel guilty about tearing down this gem, and very charming streetscape, and tried to create a building that was very respectful. That going back to the lessons of Michael Graves and color and texture and how a building should harmonize. Just refuge, the lobby. Now these were known as the damn vines up until very end. But carved them myself. I'm not particularly fond of children, but if I were, I thought that it would be nice for kids to pick out, little things. There's a bat for goth kids and whatnot. And then there I was. Stone carving is not as hard as one might think. They complained a lot about it. But there it is in the thing. And then lastly, 57th Street. And this was, very tall tower, obviously very, very narrow, and worked with shop. It was wonderful collaboration, and again, the opportunity to work in a historic building. And been fortunate enough to stay at beautiful, luxurious hotels all over the world. And if you told me to try to remember which one was which, Yeah, they're all beautiful. They're all limestone. There's an anonymity. Yeah, so after a while, with traveling as much as I do, there's a soullessness to it because, even though everything is beautiful materials, there's an anonymity and repetition. So the goal here was to, I don't know, I like inside jokes too. Do you know the Gray Bar Rats? The entrance to Grand Central Station, the Gray Bar building, and they're these little cubist rats that are running up the ropes and the rondels. The kind of Byzantine revival rondels are all their fellow rats cheering them on, getting up to the ship. So, keeping in the vocabulary of the original building. This is lined in velvet, but those are stylized ebony trees, because we wanted to pay tribute to all the elephants and all the ebony trees that gave their lives in the creation of pianos over the years. So this inspired the first mural, the first bas-relief, which is elephants breaking out of the Central Park Zoo and retaking the metropolis. This is my tribute to ebony trees. And then, the lobby, which is all the floors were recycled from the old piano loading docks. So again, that high-low, which, because I don't know, they give it the texture and the life and the warmth. That frieze, is actually Lily of the Valley. Why not? I liked it. They're little playing darts tucked in the corners, my little egg and dart joke. And the handles that are in the shape of the building. And then the public rooms, which are very idiosyncratic, but an opportunity to play with color. If you can, why not? I always wanted to do a room with tapestry. And then this was one on the storyboards. The client was of the not really ever seen the Ecstasy of St. Teresa on a storyboard, but I'm willing to go with it. And that became the inspiration for the rays of light coming down the tower elevators, and then commissioned Nancy Lorenz to work with, who's a dear friend of mine, to do the elevator doors, because you spend a lot of time looking at elevator doors. And then this is the duplex that we're working on currently. And the staircase, again, trying to, it's modern, it's traditional, trying to, have that balance. Swimming pool, very important. What's nice about this is it's all above ground, so it has natural light.
Looks like it's quite a bit above ground.
Very bit of ground. Okay, so in conclusion, a word of caution. As in the words of the great lip syncer, fame can be poisoned. This is my favorite bit of PR. Online marketing materials show the high-floor apartment was worked over by deservedly in-demand interior designer William Sofield, who is so highfalutin, his website is password encoded so the hoi polloi can't freely gawk, and is perfectly understated, always exceptionally tasteful, gloriously restrained, warmly elegant, and y'all can be assured, hideously expensive decorative handiwork. Anyways, so I'm going to have placemats made of that.
I think they sum that up so well, right? I mean, that is brand appropriate.
So
yes.
Again, I think it's always important to question yourself, your motivations, trying to stay honest. Everybody starts out nice, right? I mean, bucolic setting, great thoughts, great ideas. But frankly, Wright was also great at PR. Right? I mean, he was the one who declared himself the father of the greatest American architect. Of course, our dear friend Philip Johnson said, "Yes, you are, Mr. Wright, the greatest American architect of the last century." So, again, I try to ask myself, do I find myself wearing a cape? Do I have an urge to? Am I promoting myself as something I am not? The one thing about this business is it's like sine and cosine. When all the peaks coincide, it's great. When all the valleys, at a certain point, all the valleys coincide. It's a very, very tricky business, and there's so many variables. I think briefly I talked about the only thing I can think of that's worse or more complicated must be the restaurant business, in terms of the interdependency we have on vendors, timing, schedule, whims, economic. It's very tricky. And then there's the we loved him till we hated him. Thing. The woman who did Eat, Drink, Pray, Love, who I did not read the book, and I didn't see the movie because I'm not good with sentimental movies on flights. I sobbed during Mrs. Doubtfire.
Oh.
So instead, I kind of like kickboxing films. I saw Fall Guy and Monkey Man back to back instead of doing the Eat, Pray, Love. But there's the discussion of the muse, that in other times you're a vessel. You just are receptive to things. You're an instrument. You let, kind of what I said with Gucci, you're kind of letting the winds of inspiration blow through you, but you're not held responsible for it yourself. Like, it comes, it goes. You're not the center of authorship. And, the center of authorship, and I use this image, and I don't mean it cruelly, but it's really hard to sustain anything in this kind of stuff. Having grown up with Michael Graves and this wanting to make people stars, and the sustainability of that is and then it's very easy to get angry, especially when things are beyond your control. So I've always been more of a Gothicist as opposed to a classicist, anonymous people building a great structure together. The Gothic cathedral, I think, is such a great feat of engineering. Let's face it, the Parthenon's a wreck, right? Pyramids are pretty easy. You stack it one on top of another. And what ruined it all? The printing press. Beginning of advertising, who called it the Dark Ages? Certainly not the people in the Dark Ages. I mean, they were fun. I am very craft-based. Our studio has always been craft-based. I think it is important to take time in craft, and the Renaissance was the worst, right? I mean, have you seen the Ken Burns film on Da Vinci? It's like, can you imagine being seated next to that man at a dinner party? Do not ask him what he's doing. So what you up to lately? No, but I think, so the joke here was just that, we as architects, I think, tend to try to make an order of things, inscribing, the circles and the squares and the thing. And really, we are all just out of the womb. I think all bad behavior is based in insecurity. I mean, everybody's insecure. I think the reason the retail worked was because you could see yourself. I mean, it gave the client power, again, that you knew what you looked like because the dressing rooms were large. I think, we have such privilege getting to know our clients so intimately. The level of vulnerability in this business and the relationships you form over years is extraordinary, and the amount of trust. And I think, on those days, I just want to pull what little is left of my hair out. I think, my job is to inspire people to do something just a little bit better than the task at hand. And so, anyway, that's my 240.
There you go. You see, you got through it. All right.
Formerly 242 slides.
They said it couldn't be done. They said it couldn't be done. So I'm going to open it up for questions. So think about questions, and I imagine after that whole presentation, you might have. What the heck did all of that mean?
It's only 9 o'clock.
I know. We've got time. There might be some intermissions, food, but. You were just talking about being craft-based, you're a craft-based firm. Tell me what that really means.
Well, again, I came to New York at a time when everything was disappearing. That gilding shopping, craft was coming out. People were leaving the city in droves, and so all these incredible resources, people who made picture frames, people who even made lucite furniture, were disappearing, and felt that this was, again, just such an opportunity to kind of get to know their stories, get to know visit their workshops, see what they were making. I, as a designer, we apprenticed in a millworking shop when I didn't really know what I was doing, and the millworker said that Princeton, that door is going to warp out within 2 weeks. And so, I can design something, but it's more that I can't do it that way, but I could do it this way, and that's what was so great about working in Italy. all of those years. There's learning from the person physically making it, and there's that respect and that dialogue that I think is so important, because who am I to tell somebody else how to do their job?
But learning that whole skill process, it sounds like that changed the way you thought about the work that you did. Not just the appreciation for those people's ability and talent, but also just even understanding the process. And as you were saying, even when you apprenticed as a mill worker and really came to learn and understand building and construction in such a different way, it gave you a better understanding, yes?
Oh, absolutely. And then you want to outdo yourself a little bit, or use that staircase at Great Jones Street. I got up in my copy of the ancient Japanese jointry book and on in a compound curve, and it was it's like dancing, right? It's like you can't tell somebody, just dance beautifully.
So I mentioned to Bill when we were sitting here before we got started that David Rockwell had just been in recently, and Bill said to me, I owe my entire career to David Rockwell. I said, really? Tell me this. So why do you owe your entire career to David Rockwell?
Because I got an interview with David. It was very sweet. And after I probably did this for a while, he said, I think you should have your own firm. So he did not hire me, and we've become very close friends. So had he hired me,
had he hired you,
very, very differently. But no, wonderful man, very inspirational.
And you became good friends, and yes,
lovely. I started to watch his talk, and then I was so intimidated. I just thought, no, I better leave that. I'll watch the rest of it after I.
Well, he was great, but he didn't bring us 240 slides. So I mean, it's a trade-off. It's a trade-off. But I do want to, before we turn to questions, I do want to try and understand when you came out of architecture school. You were taught, there was a certain mindset that they wanted you to have, and a way that they wanted you to see the world. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it was definitely architecture with a capital A, and interiors did not exist, really. We were never taught about interiors in the slightest. Maybe Palladio from time to time, but even at that, it was quite rare. And when we came to New York, nobody was building buildings at the height of the recession, so it was really only interiors. And then again, that's the when you're really learning from experience as to light and shadow. So the interiors were not considered. And even when we do major buildings, we now start with the floor plan and work out. We're doing so many big scale projects which I haven't done, and it's really because we start with a furniture plan. Even if you're doing a freestanding house on a huge site, if you don't leave that 6 inches between the sofa and the coffee table exactly right, it's you can create a beautiful hell for yourself, really. Or just consider the B-flight pattern. Who wakes up first if it's a couple? Do they get on the treadmill? What behaviors drive the number of marriages we've saved? Just
despite your dislike of children, you're happy that you're saving the marriages. But how did you?
I like children I like French children.
Other people's children. Other people's children. Yes. But not for very long, it sounds like. But how did you unlearn all that you had been taught in school? How did you come to appreciate interiors in the way that you did?
Well, it was out of respect for clients and listening. And I do think that, we were talking about Ralph Lauren and Tom. I think anyone who's really good is a great listener in that respect. I think there's which you wouldn't know it.
I didn't want to say. No, but so when we had David Rockwell here, by the way, who was great. Did I mention how great he was when he was here? He was great. But one of the things that he very sweetly shared with us, the audience, the students were so keen to know what they should know about possibly getting hired at his firm. And I know that you've had some NYSID graduates working for you. I believe you have a NYSID student interning for you as we speak.
Indeed.
And I do want to hear a little bit of what you look for, what's important to you, how you think about that, how students should be thinking.
You can teach anybody any skill. I think it's a little bit of but there was one interview. I tend to ask, and now I can't, now that I'm broadcasting it, I can't ask the question anymore. I usually do this very long question, which involves a husband and a wife and their individual needs, and him liking modernism and her liking, anyway, lead them down the whole path of dialogue, and then saying, you've worked all night, you've got your presentation, and you pull up in front of the apartment. The cab pulls away, it's in the trunk, what do you do? And the most amazing woman said, okay, first, most people watch the morning news. So, and there'll usually be something, a track fire, a small fire in the Bronx. You insinuate yourself into that situation. Subliminally, they may not have been watching the television, but they know it occurred. Then you tell them that you left your presentation or something or other. And I'm marveling. I never found out what happened to her, but I wanted to. It was like she's either running a country or she's behind bars. But again, there's no kind of right or wrong answer. But I guess it's really about the thought process and just how they think. People think about things, and if they're sensitive. And it's really about. Working in a team. Right. It's just with each other. There are people who are very, very gifted who just weren't right for the studio because of the. I think it's very non-hierarchical in that way. Emma and I are tyrants and our own non-tyrant. I don't know. We should have some people in the audience, but ask us. But I think it's the respect. I would say it's kind of like a university. Everybody, I think I learn as much from the people who work with us than they may learn from me.
So you really try and drive that home for people when you're talking to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then it's very collaborative, and they have to be comfortable with that.
It is indeed.
Yeah.
We now, it's scary, we're on generations. There's a woman who worked, had to leave on maternity because she was having a baby, and now her daughter, the bump, is actually working at the studio. So we have multi-generations now as well.
That's fantastic. I love that. Okay. Well, and Emma, you've been there since the beginning?
37 years. Wow. Em and I have worked together.
That's tremendous.
She should really be up here.
Well,
But this is what my day is.
I was worried that this was, exactly. Yeah. But I think would-be students and would-be hires can get a sense. Karen has a microphone in her hand, and she will gladly come to someone who has questions. So. Right up in the front row, yes? Oh, looks like multiple questions.
Hi, Bill. Good to see you.
Hey, good to see you.
Such a pleasure. I really love a quote from you that I read where you talked about luxury, and you said, luxury isn't about 24-karat gold, it's not about cashmere, it's much more emotive and relational with the design. I was wondering what your advice would be for students who didn't necessarily grow up with a background that had access to luxury, but really wanted to dive into a luxurious design.
Well, one client had said to me on the subject of luxury when one of the financiers was saying what rich people want, and he said, whoa, what rich people want is the best. They don't always know what the best is. So it's also that educational process of, well, what gives you pleasure? What is rarefied to you? Everyone's luxury is different. I made the mistake. Ms. Russell, you may know this. There's usually a magazine deadline. I don't know how this works. Everybody's always on deadline. And what was the January, luxury issue was January or something. It was always Christmas Eve. Everybody always had to get it in that night. And it was like, we need something for the luxury issue. And I said, oh, well, sometimes I treat myself to a small chopped salad of hummingbirds' tongues. Thinking that they knew that this was a joke. I can't remember where it appeared, the amount of hate mail I got from it. But
PETA was on the phone with him the next day,
but again, it's highly personal, and I think it's, again, kind of getting to the most important thing, I think, in a client relationship is knowing why. Because somebody may say, I hate red. Well, that doesn't really help me. Then, okay, you just give them a beige house. Like, understanding why they hate red is really important, because then it's my mother hit me with that thing when I was a kid, or, like there was one project we worked on where they're like, I just hate rugs. Do not want a rug. I'm not going to have a rug in my life. So it's like, well, where are the carpets? So, it's really about understanding terminology, too.
Way to have a Bill Sofield quote at the ready for your question. That was great. Bonus points. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
How you doing? So you kind of answered a little bit of my question, but one of my big things that I love about this entering into interior design is the idea of, like, for lack of a better term, loving the client. And so I've been hearing bits of that, of like, how do you approach that? So I guess really what my question is, as someone who doesn't come from, like, very similar to Kirsta's question, like that background, but entering into a field where a lot of clients know that background, it's like, how do you approach understanding who that client is in a way that, like, really speaks to them? I know it's a big question, but it's like...
Well, no, I mean, it goes... I think it goes back to my sense of everybody is insecure in some way, like at whatever point, and I think it's just being sensitive to the fact that that's the case, and not making assumptions. I mean, not making assumptions about barriers or things. One thing my mom did teach me, which was really, really great, is we would go for a walk in the woods every day, and we had these little stations, and we had to say from day to day what had changed, which is kind of easy in the summer, but in the winter to, like, stare at a bud and say, well, something has changed. And what was great about that, it was so unculturally specific. It wasn't saying, I'm going to take you to the Met or listen to a symphony and you should like this because it has social standing. It was really honing the sense of observation, I think. So I think if we can take the question out of kind of what cultural norms are and back to something more basic or essential. I wouldn't say basic.
Thank you so much. I loved the presentation. I could have watched another 240 images.
Careful, Tony. Careful what you wish for.
I hope you'll do a book with this.
So for those of you who don't, I mean, of course, everybody know you and Joan. The most beautiful house I've ever been to in my entire life. It is perfect. And right next to Christina Grahalis, who taught me so much about art and antiques. Okay, back to Tony.
Yeah.
It wasn't where I expected that to go, but you talked a lot about the architecture, but you didn't really talk about the furniture. So I'd just love to hear how you developed a relationship to furniture and what your relationship to it, what do you particularly love, what styles, what pieces, and how did you come to appreciate all these pieces?
Well, I'm an animist, which means objects have souls, which I do believe. And for me, it's legacy, and it's not about possession. It's about everything represents a story. And Christina, you're the person who taught me that the most. You were at De Lorenzo, and there's this incredible Tiffany table in the basement that was just extraordinary. And an hour later, we were talking about Tiffany and everything. So for me, it doesn't represent a possession, it represents an idea. And when you put furniture together, it's like how you would see at a dinner party. It's about a conversation and why you think those people would like one another, which I think is what so inspires me about your house, because it's, the unexpected, or the color sense, and it can change and evolve over time. I mean, I always like changing furniture seasonally with clients. Some clients have humored me on that, where the furniture absolutely changes, or colors or rearranges from season to season.
Hi. So what advice do you have for a young designer?
So you haven't been dissuaded from the business?
He hasn't turned you off already? Okay.
As a young designer, basically.
Learn a craft. Again, maybe it's my little bit of a star architect thing. There's a difference between people who want to be a star and want to be a singer, or, and I think there's so many opportunities, like whether it's in an upholstery workshop or, almost like learn a trade. It's kind of, when I did a little, Michelle Obama had encouraged a bunch of us in Washington to lead a group of girls who had aspirations to work in the design field. And there were a lot of, I think, people had seen Project Runway, and a lot of were interested in fashion. And it really was of the, learn how to sew, like learn how linings are made, it just, so I think that's it. I think it's, and then you're indispensable. I mean, then that talent is a real commodity, because you know how that thing is made, or it's not just an idea. Would be my...
I'm curious, just as a follow-up on that, I'm curious, we talk often, so related to that, learning a trade, we talked often about going to work for another firm for a time, really learning the business that way. You had a somewhat sort of different experience there, but you had a firm. We won't talk about that firm that you had before you started your own firm, but what's with the people that you've ended up working with over the years, have you found a benefit to having people who have had other careers or have worked with big design firms and then come to you? What's your sense of the value of that?
Usually that never. Yeah, we've had people from very healthy members of the Boomerang Club, where they go out and they come back and they go, oh my God, we had no idea how horrible it was out there. But then they pick up a little experience and then come back again. So there's really, and it's great having that. I mean, really, the thing is, I've never worked for anybody else.
I know.
I've done that for a little bit. So I don't know if I would be employable, really, if I didn't have my own.
David Rockwell didn't seem to think
Exactly.
so, right? So, yeah.
I was really left with no other.
Yes, there was a question over here.
What's your favorite project that you've worked on? Maybe not the most successful, but your favorite.
Oh, you know how it's like parents. We love all of our children.
Oh.
No. What is my favorite project? Well, I'll tell you one we're working on now that is really fun, which is the Flatiron Building, which is just so wonderful, and such a sense of history and what we're discovering, because there are vaults that go under the streets, and it was the first women's bar in New York when women could not go to bars. There are menus left over, and the original workbench. There are all those photographs of the Flatiron show these people on these narrow ladders washing the windows and stuff. The ladders are still in the basement, and it's just, and all the broken terracotta that that fell off when it was being installed, shattered. There are little remnants of it there, and it's great archaeology. So I would say that's yeah, that's a pretty special project at the moment.
Anybody else? Oh, quite a few hands. All right. She's coming around. Microphone's coming around. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Bill. That was unbelievable. But I have a question for you.
But
I know that you live in a really important house by Durrell Stone. How does it feel living in a house like that? Were you intimidated by the house, and how did you deal with it, with your historical perspective and the modernism behind these men?
Oh, I've had this history of living in houses, I mean, they all leak, but that have been on the National Register. And the great thing is you don't have to live in your own house. Like, 'cause it would be like, my partner would be like, I think upon occasion I will design a house, and I've had this fantasy of what that would be. Oh God, he was like, not going to happen. It'll never get finished. You'll never be happy. So I've always kind of deferred to living in that particular house, which is the Richard Mandel house. It's international style, but what's wonderful about that one is the glass doesn't go all the way down, and it really disappears, and you feel like you're in nature. So people think of it as an object house, but it really isn't. It kind of vanishes. But there's a nice level for my cousin Marianne is here.
How many years have you been working at it?
Okay, now we're
yeah, tell us that.
Okay, so the dentist kids have rotten teeth. So moved in 2004 and have not yet painted the center portion.
Okay, yes, we've got a microphone right there. There you go.
Hi. When you meet with a potential client and you ask questions, they ask questions, what's your process? When do you decide to turn down a potential client?
Well, it used to be easy because Wanda had worked with us for 25 or 7 years, and we left it entirely, as my personal assistant, our personal assistant, and we left it entirely up to her. It was like, because
Which
it
I love
was,
that.
what has the process been like getting up to that point? You know, how did their assistant treat you? Were they jerks? Were they? So I'm being quite truthful, but other than that, it really is about a dynamic, and also realistic expectations. Like, what are your priorities? Like, what would you like? I mean, some people, I need to be in by a holiday. Others, I need to meet a certain budget, or I have a certain aesthetic. So I think it's really kind of understanding what their program is and what they. And also, if we find it fascinating, I think at this point we have the luxury of not taking on projects. So I think it's is this a fascinating problem, or is it, stylistically or programmatically? Because again, if we did the same thing again and again, it would be bored out of our minds.
Okay, last question from the audience. Last one.
Over here.
Oh, sorry.
Could it be the second to last question?
Well, let's see.
I'll go quick.
I'll go fast. So first of all, I thoroughly enjoyed the presentation. It was really nice to see all the work. You mentioned some artisans as you were talking through. How do you build collaboration? How collaborative is it? Can you talk about that? Because
Sure.
I'm sure that's
I
like a
guess
partnership with the client.
we've worked with a lot of the same people for 20, 30 years. So again, there's kind of a shorthand, and that I think we always, all of our designers have got their radar out, and we constantly meet with people to try to bring beautiful samples in. I think samples are all over the studio, so people touch and feel and get inspired. So something that was maybe rejected for one project, so an industrial material will end up in a residential project, or residential material will end up in a commercial project. So But it's always just something that's exquisite or unusual, and that can be. It doesn't have to do with something being expensive necessarily.
Was there someone I missed over here?
Was there someone? Okay, yes, right back there.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks very much. Great talk. Great 240 slides. Too. But I'd love to know about your work with Helen and Bryce Martin and how that came about. Like, how did that start? How did that continue? And how did it end?
Well, it started, we were the third people on the project. We'd known each other socially. And Bryce had said he wanted a beautiful laundry room and something or other. And that he really thought a laundry room with a view of the Hudson would be great. And he said, the first two architects basically said, there's no way we're giving the housekeeper. I mean, it's crazy. You need to put it in the basement. The basement is huge. And he said, and people wouldn't, I kind of said it over and over again, and somehow the laundry room ended up in the basement. And he said, since I do the laundry, I want it. And evidently part of his process was when he, needed a break from painting or drawing, he would do laundry. And so that was adapting to that. And we worked on Rose Hill together for years and years. And I just saw Helen in Morocco, and so it was extraordinary. I mean, I learned so much from her. I remember her saying, and again, it's like I just learned to know her wisdom. She said, I can afford things, and the point of having that is to have beautiful things, and the point of having beautiful things is to be inspired by them. And the way you get inspired by them is to look at them. And if you have them away, you can't look at them. And so if I'm not looking at them, I don't need them. So we ripped out all the closets. Now, every meeting starts with, I need plenty of storage space. So this was a great, fresh look at something. And again, in terms of learning, and even, anyway, just lesson after lesson, but that's.
Okay, Karen, we're gonna, yeah, we're good? All right. So I have to give thanks to one of our board members, the great David Kleinberg, who was instrumental in bringing Bill Sofield here this evening. Reached out to Bill. Bill wrote back to me and said, now, Dennis, I'm not really much of a public speaker, so I just want you to lower your expectations, and I'll do my best. But he was so gracious, and as you see, he's a fantastic public speaker, right? When he has control of the clicker. Yeah. It is a gift for everyone in the audience, and for the students who got to watch this online, and for the many people that will get to watch it afterwards. You're so generous to make the time. It's a real pleasure to have you here, and
this is wonderful.
I thank you.
And
This
school is great, and thank you for having me.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Will you please join me again in thanking Bill? You made it. You made it. See? It was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was really.
I was told.